to the election form for the 5 candidates running for Medina City School Board. As you can see, only one candidate has shown up. I'll speak to that in a minute, but tonight's event is sponsored by the Outrage page and Moving Forward Medina. For you that don't know, I'm Jeanne Pritchard and I'll be your moderator. I'll try to make sure the 5 candidates do not argue during the course of this evening. Just briefly speaking about the other candidates who elected not to come, Mrs. Pavlik had posted on her web page, her Facebook page, that she had a family commitment. Mrs. Parkhurst didn't plan on attending, so Mr. Skidmore said to Mr. Collins that since Mrs. Parkhurst wasn't here, he wasn't coming. And then that leaves us to Mrs. Malone. And late this afternoon, she posted on her Facebook page that there was a cease and desist letter and she could not attend. And the adult education director at the Career Center, Peggy Reeves, is here to speak just briefly about that cease and desist letter. Peggy, you want to come on down?
To my knowledge, there would be nothing in the letter that would preclude Mrs. Malone from attending this evening. And I'm not terribly familiar with what the contents of the letter is, other than to say Mrs. Malone had posted on Facebook and in other public social media forums several things that were not based in fact regarding the Career Center, and people that were directly impacted by that had notified her that she needed to stop.
All right, thank you very much. Right now, we'll have opening comments from the candidate that is in attendance, Matt Collins.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming out here, as well as for those who are watching online. I know we're having issues posting this live. Unfortunately, the board's Wi-Fi will not let us stream to certain websites. So it will be posted immediately after the event, and I apologize for that. So while I'm sorry the circumstances are not more favorable, I want to make one thing clear. Tonight is about you. Tonight's about your questions, your concerns, your voice being heard. I'm saying this as a parent myself, I'm saying this as an educator, and I'm saying this as a proud resident of Medina. I will make a few comments before we get started, but then I'm turning this entire thing over to you and your questions. Someone asked me why I chose to run and got this whole thing started. So I'm running because I have seen what poor boards can do to a district. I'm running because I have seen what strong boards can do for a district as well. I'm running because I love my daughter and because I want her to attend these schools. I'm running because my entire life's work is education, and my dedication is to my own students and to all children. I'm running because I have skills and knowledge that I would like to offer this community as an asset. This campaign has been very different than my opponents. I have attended the most candidate events out of all of us. I was at MCTA's forum, at the Republican Liberty Caucus's forum, Medina Democrats candidates night, which another candidate was lined up to speak for but did not attend. This event, as well as Mr. Skidmore's coffee event, which I Skyped in all the way from Las Vegas, despite it being 5 a.m. in local time, as well as the Kiwanis event. So I've reached out to meet with parents, teachers, and administrators since day one. I wasn't focused on meeting state house members, but our local community, our neighbors. I have also not taken a single dollar from anyone. The reason for all this is simply due to the fact that I feel that this campaign should be about your voices and your concerns, not about who can spend the most money or get their name plastered all over town. I'm not criticizing any other candidate here, but explaining what I'm doing and why. It's important to me as a parent and an educator that the concerns of the community are heard. Today, MCTA came out with an endorsement for Mr. Skidmore, Ms. Parkhurst, and myself. I'm going to read you that letter quickly. The Medina City Teachers Association is endorsing incumbents Rebecca Parkhurst, Rob Skidmore, and newcomer Matthew Collins as candidates to the three Medina City School Board education seats up for election this November. This document is posted on the Outrage page as well as my own page if you'd like to read the rest, but I wanted to make that clear. This is not a typical move for MCTA to make, and the reason they are taking this is the same reason I am running. We both know that the board has done a great job with finances, but now needs members who will build the bridges and understands what can happen when a board doesn't know policy or their own bylaws. I work in a district where I've seen a board who doesn't even follow their own procedures and couldn't get a levy on the ballot this fall, and thus is facing 7 closures, 7 buildings. We want to ensure that our board members who are willing to work with both sides and all sides, who haven't attacked parents or educators in our district. This is why I'm running. I want to see transparency brought into the central focus. At the Republican Liberty Caucus, we asked of us what we would do to ensure that the previous mistakes didn't happen again. I was very clear, transparency. Now the current board will say that us having Medina TV is transparency. I will say that technology from 20 years ago is not up to date and we can do much better. I have seen other districts where boards use Facebook and Twitter to post documents, questions, and videos of their meetings. I want to take this step forward. It's time for us to move forward. The board's work sessions need to be public too. It's time for access to all members in our community. The board's, I'm tired of hearing candidates try to change the subjects by saying Medina has residents who don't use internet. Last time I checked, that's not a majority of our residents in this community. We need to meet our population. No more excuses. When I look at our district today, I see that we're at a crossroads. While we've regained financial stability, we have yet to rebuild our prestige. The current board can make any claims they like, but no other district in the area has lost an entire graduating class worth of students. And if you wish to verify at the end of the night, there is a member here from Cloverleaf Board who will most certainly verify this statement. You can look at the state report, and you can complain about the state report cards all you want. But the state rankings don't compare us to the state standards, it compares us to other districts. When I look at the rankings and see that we can't make the top 100, let alone the top 200, I'm discouraged by that. The time for excuses is done. Leadership is accepting accountability and responsibility. In my classroom, if one of my students doesn't grow or succeed, it's my fault. Not the students, not their parents, it's mine. And at the end of the day, I'm the one who's held accountable. When an entire district is not achieving, then it is up to the leadership to accept responsibility. No one holds that power more than our board. Our board directs policy, helps approve procedures, and appoints our superintendent. It's time to admit that we need to change and grow. It's time for us to be the leaders in the community, not to have the rest of the districts nearby pass us up. Time for that's over. So I make a lot of claims, and you may wonder, can I back them up? I had a parent of one of my current students offer to write a letter, and I wanted to read it to you so that you can know the commitment to the commitment and dedication that I have to my students that will carry forward to the students in this district. I apologize if I tear up because it was actually really sweet. Hello, Medina City parents. I'm writing you today as a fellow concerned parent and recommending you vote for Mr. Matthew Collins for Medina City School Board. I'm the mother of 3 and stepmother of 4. I understand the stress and worry that parents go through when making decisions about our children's education, and I've also felt the stress when a school district fails at a leadership level. Our youngest daughter attends Green Valley Elementary in Parma, where she has the privilege of having Mr. Collins as her kindergarten teacher. From the first day of orientation, I could tell how much passion Mr. Collins has for his job. In these few short months since school began, I can honestly say that none of our children has had a teacher who goes as far out of their way to ensure that parents are kept so well informed about our children's progress and the wants to make sure that parents are involved in what goes on in the classroom. He provides parents with clear weekly updates and values parent opinions. It is evident how much Mr. Collins cares about providing the best education possible and understands that when parents and teachers work together, students are at the advantage. He has communicated his plan to utilize the most current and innovative teaching techniques. Mr. Collins understands how important quality education is and is dedicated to ensuring that even down to the kindergarten level. It's refreshing to see his commitment to being the best teacher he can be. Mr. Collins has also clearly communicated his concerns for how each individual student is progressing and genuinely cares deeply about his students. It is for these reasons that if I lived in Medina City, I would be voting for Mr. Collins to be a board member. I believe that the city of Medina would greatly benefit from Mr. Collins serving in the community and his community's education needs through the position on the Medina City School Board, Melissa Marotta. So tonight, a lot will be said and done, and I will try my best to be positive. But above all else, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat answers. I'm not going to give you fluff. I will give you real substance, and I will try my best to answer everything. If I can't answer a question, I will admit it, and I will send out a video response shortly in the next upcoming days. So I thank everyone for attending, and I hope tonight I can win your support. Thank you.
I'm gonna start by asking a question, and then I'm gonna open it up to the floor, so you could get to ask questions. And if there's a brief moment, I have a whole list of questions to ask. But here's your first question. As Medina begins its path to rebuilding its staffing to levels that existed pre-RIF, which departments do you see as the biggest priority for our staffing selections?
So as someone who will always admit when I am wrong or I make a mistake, my original agenda was clearly that kindergarten full day was the first thing to look at. However, after talking to administrators, talking to teachers, and talking to parents, I would say the first goal is ensuring that our core, those things that are our foundations in the middle school, which have not regained full staffing, should be our focus. It's my understanding that middle school math is not even at the current staffing levels it needs to be to ensure all of our students have success with just something as common as math. I agree, and I understand other candidates talk a lot about, well, I'm going to add STEM, I want to add career services, but the truth is we have a limited pool of money, and if we are going to ensure the success for our students, they need those basic foundations, which should be our first focus. So I think, honestly, that needs to be our first focus. I mean, I do, obviously, as a parent who wants my own children to have full-day kindergarten, I do think that's important, but I think ensuring that those core subjects have full staffing needs to be the first step above all else.
Does anybody have any questions? We'll start now. If not, I can keep going. So I know some people had questions. Anybody want to jump in and ask one?
Yes,
Okay, come on up.
I can get out of this.
Those chairs are tricky.
Just push that green button. The button.
Where it says push.
Okay, my name is Tom Godley. I live over in Medina, and I've got one question to ask. You mentioned you have financial restraints for a lot of these programs. I'm wondering, as a taxpayer, which funds all of this, because you as a school board, you don't do anything to bring the money in to make this happen. It's the taxpayers. And I've always felt that one way to get some of these programs completed to success is not to tax people more money, but really to look at ways to streamline and to reform the spending. There's a pool of money. People that don't have to go out and scrimp and save to pay the taxes that make this all possible have no concept at all of what they're doing when they say, oh, we would like this program to increase this for the student body. For example, and I don't want to be facetious about this, right here, the new football carpet that they laid down. Excuse me, when you play football, nobody says you have to land on a feather pillow. Football is football. You hit the ground. Why take those funds that could be used to explore some of these other programs that everybody is looking forward to enrich the education of the students rather than a football field carpet? I just can't understand that. The logic doesn't mean anything. First of all, just try to determine how many people benefit by that stadium. You know, football players, the cheerleaders, the band, and maybe what, you have some other sports out there. What about the rest of the student body that doesn't get any enrichment from that football field, or whatever you want to call it? All I'm saying is, you know, I look at these candidates, and this is the thing that really brought me over here. Every one of you are employed. There isn't any one of you that are on a fixed income. You never ever address the population that's on a fixed income. We matter. We have to, we can't go out to the rest of the community and say, you know what? I don't have enough money to heat my house, or I don't have enough money to buy some food. Give me some more, give me some more. I mean, what we do on fixed incomes is you find better ways to utilize the money that you do have, and not continually go out and browbeat, sometimes 3 or 4 times bring up levies to garner more money for programs like who knows why. I'm going to end with that because I could speak for a long
No.
time.
So it's Tom? Tom?
Yes, my name is Tom.
Sorry, it's nice to meet you, Tom. So I'm gonna comment with a couple different things if you're okay with that, because I don't feel like at this exact moment, that's a question where you're gonna have a definitive response. But I'm gonna say a few things. So I'm a proud Medinian, but I'm not a native. I grew up in Avon Lake, and I grew up in a community, my mother just sold her house, which is a much smaller house than mine. And my wife and I bought our house for roughly $180,000, and she sold hers for $290,000. Now that community has a reputation because of an investment into the schools. I'm not going to disagree with the football stadium because, I mean, look at me, I'm clearly not a football player. That would not have benefited me. However, I have friends and I have a stepbrother who was. What I will say is that as a community, when you build up multiple areas of prestige, it helps support the local community. When you have a district that has prestige, where there's so basic economics, where you have supply and demand. When you have a district where there's demand for people to come into, not where numbers are dropping, but where you have a demand, people I want to go there. I mean, we see our property values increase, you see local businesses doing well, and you see the entire community, the economy doing well. I'm not going to disagree with you. I don't think very large expenditures should be our focus when we have a tight budget at this exact second. What I will say is, funding today is not the same as it was 20 years ago. More of the burden, because of choices at the Ohio State House, has been placed on this community. I will say that 2 candidates in this election have made comments that they are not willing to confront this issue. I do think that's a big issue. I think the fact that our local community has had so much of this burden thrown on them is ridiculous. It's unfair to people who have fixed incomes, and I totally understand that. I mean, my grandmother lives on a fixed income. I totally understand and respect that. But what I'm also going to say is that when we invest in our school, it builds our local economy, which, you know, when my grandpa he had a stroke, and when we had to sell his house, you know, because the value of that house was what it was, it allowed us to cover the cost for him to have assisted living. It allowed us to cover the cost of his medical cost. You know, having the higher value on that house allowed us to cover things that he needed. So it's kind of like a hard balancing act, I think, is the honest answer. And it's unfortunate, but it comes down from the fact that the State House has really given us the short end of the bargain. And what needs to happen is that we need to have a district stand up and say, enough is enough. You're doing this, and it's been ruled unconstitutional for a long time, and other states have found solutions around it, so why aren't we? And that's the best answer I can give you. Because it's unfair, but the truth is that your state representatives keep voting to make it unfair. That's not something I can control.
Okay, those statements aside, it still comes down to asking for more money rather than going out and finding more economical ways to produce the same results. I'll give you just one example. I just happened to pick this thing up. This is from John Burke, Medina County Treasurer. For my schools, the tax for a half a year was $1,984. That's almost $4,000 a year that they're asking me. And I'm on a fixed income, and it keeps on going up and up and up. How much can, you know, they say you can't get blood out of a rock or whatever. How much more until we get somebody on the board that says, hey, we've got these programs, this is what our goal is, to get educated people through this program, and this is how we're gonna do it within the budget that we have.
So,
Not going out and 3-4 times browbeating the public, we need this, or we're gonna lay out this, or we're gonna cancel busing. You know, cancel busing. You look out here and find out how many of these kids drive. You know, why even have busing? Anyway, again, I could go on and on.
no, I understand your concerns.
The basic point that I want to make, though, is instead of asking for more money, work with what you have and do better with what you have. I don't see anybody coming forward with better product for the money.
The only thing I can offer you, I'm only gonna make 2 responses to you. The only thing I can offer you personally is having knowledge in the actual field of education gives insight to saying, well, this is a program that actually is a waste, and this is a program that gets results. Everyone can claim that they know this all they want, but this is my expertise. I have 8 years worth of college saying that this is my expertise. I'm happy to look at things and say, well, this isn't getting us results, why are we doing that? And this is getting us results, so we should be focusing on that. I'm happy to do so. The other thing I will say is, I sat down with one of the principals in the district a few months ago, or a month ago, and we talked about, as the district starts rehiring teachers, creative ways to fill multiple voids at once. And so I think, again, having a different viewpoint than just slash and burn is the way we're going to be able to find the best bang for our buck. I'm someone who believes in that too. I'm a smart shopper. My mom's a shopaholic. You know, I believe in ensuring the products I buy have the best quality. And I don't think that our budget should be anything different. So I'm happy to take a look, but again, that's all I can offer you at this moment until we get there. But I'm happy to try.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just since you brought it up, and talked about the State House and our state representatives, it's well been over 20 years. What do you feel the solution to the problem is, and what are you willing to do to try to fix it?
Okay, so I mean, like, okay, so if I had to list the things that I'm nerdy about, it's like economics, history, and education policy. And I don't know anyone who's paying attention, or was watching this summer, but there was a big fight in Illinois. Illinois had the same funding method as we did for years and years and years, and their state house tried to fix the issue this summer, to which their governor vetoed it, claiming that he wanted to punish a couple of districts, which is unfortunate. I think what needs to happen is the same thing. There needs to be pressure on our state house, not just from constituents, but school boards need to band together and say, look, enough's enough. You know, this has been essentially illegal for 20 years, and you've done nothing. If you don't do something, we're going to hold you liable because you're essentially breaking the law by not fixing this problem. And the fact is that I know that there are other candidates who are not willing to do that because they've made it clear that they're not willing to do that. I think it's time to take the fight. If my mom was here, and I know she's busy with my grandma, as I said, my grandma's getting old up there. She's busy with her tonight. You know, she'd be happy to let you know I as an individual, since the age of 5, have never backed down from a fight that I thought was righteous. And I think it's time to fix it. It's unfair that the burden goes on so much because it's unevenly distributed. I mean, I look at the community I teach in too. I purposely chose to teach in underprivileged communities, and I look and I see the things that they're able to afford, and it's unfair. I mean, a child, even within our own district, a child's success shouldn't be determined based upon where you were born or who your parents are. Every child should be given that opportunity to reach that American dream. I mean, from my understanding, that was the foundation of what we came together to do all those years ago. And I think it's time that we hold the state accountable for not doing that.
At one time, one superintendent, it's not, in Medina, expressed that they were just going to spend what they needed to spend, and when they ran out of money, they were just gonna send the bill to the state. What do you think about that proposal?
I find that to be rather appalling. And so I'm not gonna lie about this. So, I mean, everything I've had in my life, and I look at myself and I go, I'm advantaged. I'm privileged for where I am in my life and all the things I have, my family, my home. But I have lived through struggle. When I was in my undergrad, I had no money. I was on my own. I've lived broke, and I know what that feels like. And so, understanding what it feels like to have no money, you know, my whole mindset for the past, I think it's been 8 years, has been, how do I ensure I'm living within my means, but still doing, you know, making sure my responsibilities are met. I have a kid. I have another kid on the way. You know, for me, budgeting is just natural. And our family would go, okay, well, you know, this is the amount we can spend this month. This is the amount we need to save because we need to plan for just in case X, Y, or Z happens. I mean, you never know, especially with a baby on the way, what kind of issues or complications can occur. And so I'm someone who always believes, you know, you live within your means. You know, so I have a saying, and I say this to my students all the time, you know, you hope for the best and you plan for the worst. And that's just kind of the way I think we should treat our finances. We hope for the best, but we plan for the worst things to happen, and if they do, then at least we're prepared.
What is the value in having a high-quality curriculum, and how would you define a high-quality curriculum? Like, what's the difference between curriculum and content standard, and what role does the board have in making the curriculum decisions?
All right, so for those of you who don't know the definition, I'll define it quick. Curriculum is the tools, the resources, and the methodology in which instruction occurs. So it's the books you use, it's the technology you use, it's the way you let your students explore. Content standards are the goals you have, the goals that have been depicted that students have to have at a certain age. And I'm not going to get into the whole debate about content standards at this point. I mean, most of them are pretty okay for the most part. And the idea is that you say, hey, all kindergartens have blank. And we started doing this really strongly in the 2000s because we recognized as a country we weren't competitive. Our education results per dollar were not competitive to the rest of the world. And so we started saying, well, maybe we need to up our standards a little bit. And so slowly we've been pushing for that. So that's what standards are. It's like this whole idea that, hey, all kindergartners in America, no matter where they are, should be able to do blank. And all ninth graders who took history should know blank. And so it's a little different now than what it was. So, for instance, if you did history now, it wouldn't be, hey, we all know when Christopher Columbus sailed, but it would be, why did he sail? What were the results of his sailing? What were the results of European exploration? How do those results carry over into lasting effects into today's world? And how can you relate that to events in today? That's where the content is different. So curriculum is the way you're teaching. So in my own classroom, I believe in hands-on, engaging. We do what's called project. I try to do as much as I can, project-based learning, which is where you're kind of doing these big hands-on activities. This is my first year doing kindergarten, so it's a little different. I'm not gonna lie, I've taught middle school and upper elementary for years, and kindergarten is definitely harder. But so like a high-quality curriculum is one that I would define as accessible to all your students. Just as I've been stating that a high-quality district is accessible to all its constituents. It's this idea that I was taught years ago called UDL, which is the Universal Design of Learning, where all of your learning is accessible by your low students as well as your high students. And it's shaped in a way that everyone can be involved. So I'm going to caution, this is not something that can be crafted and then handed to teachers. It's a really hard process. And I'm not going to claim I'm really great at it right now in kindergarten. It took me years to get good with upper elementary. But it's something that is worthwhile. So in my district, until we had budget issues, we had, I we had 6 or 7 curricular coaches, and they would come around and say, what do you want to do, how can we help you? And so that allowed us to then say, well, I have students who are having trouble with blank by blank, how do I make something so grand that all of them can do this? And I know Mr. Sable is looking at those steps as well, because that's where we see high quality education going. When we look at the districts that have top attainment, that's where we see their curriculum going. It's not so much rigid, like here's the textbook open at page 1, it's saying, well, we recognize that all of our students are having trouble with multiple digit division. So how do we find a way that everyone can learn this and understand it and explain it? And so that's where high quality curriculum is different, and it's not so much a standardization as much of having the resources available. It's human resources, having that availability to be flexible. It's not something that's always cheap, but what I will say is when you look at the districts that have invested in it, they are the ones that are your top ranking districts in the state. And so those are the districts where that demand is high, where people are saying, well, if I get to pick where I'm going to move in Ohio, that's where I'm going. And this is something that I know our superintendent has looked at and says this is where we need to go. And I think that's really the big step. And I think having someone on the board who understands what it actually looks like, because there's a lot of misconceptions, is going to be vital to ensuring that we have those opportunities for our students. What I will say as a board, I've seen boards that micromanage and kind of say, here's the book you're all going to use, here's the book we approve. Most boards don't have a background in education, and it would be the same as, I mean, my friends in medical administration, it'd be the same as me coming into a hospital. I have no idea what I'm doing. I may know like basics of budgeting, but I'm not going to be sure what is good and what's not. I'm going to have no idea. And so we need that viewpoint here saying, here's how we do this responsibly with still getting results. So I think that's, you know, where the push is going, if that answers your question.
Well, go along with that, your curriculum coaches that you used to have, obviously that's going to be an added expense. Somewhere you're going to have, I don't know whether they're full-time, part-time, but at some point there's going to have to be a budget decision as to how that's going to be handled.
So some districts I know, and I've talked to other districts, have found that it was cheaper because of the rising cost of textbooks. I mean, over the past decade, textbooks have gone up over 800%, which is insane. It's actually cheaper to hire a physical person than it is to buy textbooks for all the kids. And that, again, those are those creative solutions where if you don't understand what best practices looks like in the field, you're not going to be able to come up with. And so those are the kinds of solutions where, again, we're getting the most bang out of our buck because we're saying, well, yeah, maybe we don't have a science textbook for the 3rd graders, but look, we have someone who knows what strong science projects look like, and they're going to come in and help ensure all of our teachers can do this for all of their students. And so in return, yeah, we got rid of all these science books for 3rd and 4th graders, but we have someone available who can teach the teachers how to do this instead. And so it ends up saving you money in the long run, because those books are super expensive.
Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead. Oh, right.
Hi, Ray Gordon. I have a question. In your opening statement,
Push the button.
you mentioned that we lost an entire class of people. So I'm assuming that's a school class, right? Like a graduating class?
Yeah, it's roughly around 400 students.
Okay. So I think it's a little bit larger, but what does that cost us?
So
it's like $6,000 a student, right?
Yeah, so it does cost us tax dollars when we lose students. The other thing to look at, and again, talking to other boards, when other boards nearby have when other districts have open enrollment, that money follows the student. So, I mean, we lose that money. And so it hurts our district because then what we're doing is we're taking our budget and just cutting it.
So that's like $2.4 million.
Yeah, it's a major expense.
So, I mean, what would you do to assure that we weren't losing these students to whether they're parochial schools or inter-district type of transfers, right? So you go to Highland or Wadsworth or wherever. Right?
So I think the big thing is, especially going through and I spent a couple hours, I'm kind of a numbers nerd, going through the ODE data, and I just wanted to know for myself. And you see like what areas, because there are districts that, especially around us, where you are seeing loss. But then there are districts, and my understanding is that Cloverleaf this year actually added students. So there are districts nearby that are adding and not losing. So that this whole excuse that it's just all around is ridiculous because there are districts that are adding students. So we have to say, why are they adding? And we need to be reaching out to those districts and saying, well, what are you doing to get the most bang for your buck, and how can we do that? And I'm not saying we need to be copying everyone, but we need to be able to at least get ideas and then kind of go from there. I think that's the best way to start, is seeing what everyone else is doing who is getting results and saying, how can we do that so that we can start attracting families? Because the truth is, if we're going to keep losing students, eventually it's going to hurt us to the point where we're going to have to make cuts again. And we don't want to do that.
Well, I mean, wouldn't those cuts lead to losing more students?
Yes.
Okay.
It would lead to a circular loop. I've seen this happen in other districts where as you make staffing cuts, you end up with 34 first graders in a classroom, which I don't know if you know a lot about 6 and 7-year-olds, but if you have 34 of them and you got to make sure all of them are growing and all of them are learning, it's hard. It's nearly impossible. In fact, it goes against what's known as best practice. And so what ends up happening is parents go, well, I don't want that. I'm going to move to blank and blank instead because they don't do that. And so we lose families. And what happens is that hurts other things here. When we don't have people living here, it hurts our local economy, it hurts our stores, it hurts our industry. And that's why, and I know a lot of people like blow it off, but school board is one of those things that you have to invest in. You look at those cities that have the top districts in the state, they have strong local economies. They're not worried. I don't think Hudson's worrying about losing business anytime soon. And that needs to be our mindset, is how do we build so that we're attracting new people, new ideas, and new business. I think because it all intertwines.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So Peggy Reeves, I put 3 children, K-12 through Medina City Schools, nobody living in my basement. So I think that's a good thing right now. One of the things you keep talking about are best practices, and several times you've mentioned middle school. And my understanding is with the last cuts that they took away the middle school model and went to a junior high model. And I would say I would attribute a great deal of my children's success to the experience they had at Claggett Middle School in the middle school model. Is that something that you would see as a priority to return?
So, and again, this is why I've been reaching out to people since day one, teachers, administrators. When I talked to Mr. Farson over at AI Root, because he was very nice, it's like, yeah, come on in, we'll talk. It was a great meeting. We talked about what things he felt was going to make his students most successful. We talked about diversification of offerings, having, those core classes. Here's what I'm going to say though. I grew up in a city where we had a 5-6 building and a 7-8 building. I don't know if you know 5th graders, but they're not like 8th graders, and 6th graders truly aren't like 8th graders. It's a world of difference what those 4 years really make. By seeing that though, you saw specialists able to come in and say, hey, here's how these kids learned well, and here's how these kids learned well. Am I saying that's what we need to go? No, but I'm saying what I would say is that those discussions, if they are really concerns that everyone's having, but they need to happen. And they need to be public too. Those discussions need to be made so that all of the public has access to them, and the information needs to be clear to everyone. And we need to talk about, okay, well, here's how we're going to ensure that all these students are successful because we want this model. And here's how we're going to ensure this group of students is successful because we're going to do this model. And I know a lot of the candidates have talked about, well, we need to ensure everything's equal and this, we don't want everything to be the same board. Equality and equitableness are not the same. I know a lot of people mix those up. Equality is, hey, I have 3 kids and I give them all $5 allowance. Equitableness is, hey, I have 3 kids, one of them's 2, I give her a nickel. She's just as happy. It's recognizing the differences. Your 14-year-old needs a couple more dollars than your 3-year-old. And so recognizing that there are differences, but saying, how do we ensure that success? I think those are the discussions that we need to be having right now, and they need to be public.
Yeah, I just think that the teaming is so critical at that demographic age. I really think it's important to children in terms of their growth and their learning. Just one more question.
Sure.
So my parents, the school district I graduated from in Southern Ohio, is one of the high-rated ones in the state. And there's no industry to support the schools, but they did go to an income tax. And is that something that Medina has considered?
I don't know if the other candidates have considered it. I know where I grew up, the taxes were a little different. I grew up in a community where they did say, hey, here's a multi-million-dollar football field, and it passed without blinking. Because the community said, well, we want this because it's gonna attract more growth. I grew up in a community where if you wanna go shopping, you have to drive 2 towns over. But it doesn't mean, like, Avon Lake is still known for prestige because they invest in the schools. And because of that, property values are high. My sister just sold her house as well, which is weird, everyone's selling their houses apparently. And her house sold for almost $100,000 more than mine, and they're roughly the same size, and it's just insane to me. But I look at it and I think about it and I go, well, if you go to that school, you know what you're getting. And so as a parent, that's the demand, you know what you're gonna get. When you move here, and I know on Saturday there was a publicized event that wasn't accessible the way this event is. But that was one of the questions was about this, this fairness per building, because for those who don't know, our buildings in the district don't have the same achievement. Depending on what part of town you live in determines what achievement you're gonna have. And to me, that's just weird. I grew up in a community, I had friends who were on state food stamps, and I had friends who had multi-million-dollar houses, but they both got the same quality education. And for me, it's looking at this and saying, how do we ensure by having these discussions with all the stakeholders that we're getting this?
Okay, and just, like I said, just income tax, I think, answers the question that Tom was presenting too, about how do you continue to go after people on fixed incomes.
Well, and when you do things like saying, hey, we're gonna give the city a break on taxes, that has to come from somewhere. You just gave a tax break on the back of kids. You're not, on the back of people who can't afford it. These are kids.
Well, I'll say, in my parents' district at least, when they went to the income tax, that was the first time the district actually was operating in the black. So
Yeah,
is
it
something
makes a big change.
considering.
It makes a huge change, and there are other things we can do too to ensure that we have a higher revenue. I know it's been totally different than what we'd see out here, but I know, like, for instance, Hudson's, they're looking at installing fiber optics. I mean, if you wanna attract young families, legitimate internet that doesn't cancel on them at 5 in the morning, that doesn't have a data cap, that's gonna be bringing people in left and right. And there you go, you're increasing your tax revenue. So there are there are lots of solutions, and I'm not saying that's not one we shouldn't look at. But what I'm saying is that until we can say, here's how we're gonna rebuild and build that prestige up, we can tax everything we want, but we're not gonna attract people.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that. I'm just saying down the road, it's something to consider.
I mean, I'm open to anything.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will comment though real quick, that the 5-year plan does take into account that there has to be a raise at some point. If you look at the numbers and you look at the math and everything the treasurer has posted, it's not going to, eventually something's gonna have to happen because it's going to run, it's not gonna be able to do everything that's planned. It's just not.
Mr. Gordon brought up about the 400 students that we lost, and I thought maybe his question was headed, do you believe in open enrollment?
I mean, my thing is, I've never been one to discriminate against a kid. And kids are kids are kids. A kid from Akron is just as much of a kid from Medina as from Cleveland as from Solon. Kids are kids. If a parent wants to help give us money so that their kid can receive a quality education, I personally don't see the issue. I mean, I just want to ensure that all kids have access. Like I said, that's my stand as an educator and as a parent.
Well, to go back to that, I mean, you brought it up that, I mean, Medina is not in the top 200, and I've lived here my entire life, and I never remember ever saying in my entire life, oh, I want to be like Highland. But Highland is a 52nd ranked district in the state. Hudson, which we are always compared to whenever it came to anything when we negotiated, is 37. Avon Lake 24. Revere doesn't nearly have the population that we do, 22. Brecksville 13. Rocky River 8, and our football opponent from a week ago, Solon, is ranked number 2. Now I would think to get kids to want to come here, we would have to do something. So what can we do that isn't going to cost us an arm and a leg, that we can bring the 400 kids back, and some of them we may not bring back because their parents believe in homeschooling. But bring back the ones that are going to private schools or another district, and then to attract students if we ever decide to go to open enrollment.
I think again, we need to be looking at how do we get the highest achievement. Curricular changes are the easiest way to do so. As I've mentioned, other districts found that it was easier to have a personnel available than it was to have, a bunch of 10-year-olds to have a science textbook. And I know people can think, why is he saying not to have a science textbook? So the state of Ohio, for like each grade, all the way up until like 9th grade, there's like 6 things you need to know about science each year. They're like, hey, you're in 4th grade, you need to know like about planets, that they exist. You need to, I can't remember, gosh, it's been a long time. Water cycle, the weather cycle, they're like, that's about it. So the fact that the state's saying that there's only 6 things you need to know, but each one of these textbooks is hundreds of dollars, why are we spending hundreds of dollars to teach 6 things? When I could easily go, and I could beat Miss Frizzle and say, guys, we're gonna take a field trip, it's a lot cheaper, or we're gonna do some big project and get messy here. I mean, that's the way I like to do things in my room, and you see it's cheaper. I'm someone who, when I taught and I was given textbooks, I sat down with my curricular coaches and said, look, I recognize they do blank, 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 but they're not even fully meeting the requirements by the state's law, and they're not. So how can I make sure I have better quality, opportunities? And that's why I say, I think looking at those solutions first, it's gonna get our achievement up, and then that's gonna be the draw. When we look, because again, you can complain about the state report card all you want, but when you look at those state lists, that's us compared to our neighbors. That's not us compared to the state's qualifications, that's us compared to every other district nearby. And if we can't move up that, we're not gonna attract people. It's as simple as that. And when we stop attracting people, it's gonna hurt, it hurts everyone. It hurts our property value, it hurts local economy. I think we need to find those kinds of solutions. How do we get academic solutions to build that prestige, and then let's start investing in everything else. I think that's our first step.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, we're gonna kind of change the thing just a little bit, and we're gonna talk about special education. Special education is often blamed as an expensive expenditure and sometimes overly exaggerated in its costs. What do you see as the value of special education? And do you believe in the cost associated with special education, or would you like to see changes?
So, there's another board member here from another district. We were talking a couple months ago about a meeting that they had, or a board meeting they had, where someone came up and said, oh, this special education is 30% of your budget. And he was telling me, so he looked at this person and said, so you're telling me 3 out of every 10 teachers in this building is in the special education. And so I look at it and I go, look, first off, it's exaggerating the cost, and that's ridiculous. Because here's the thing, it goes against everything that I was taught we value. My grandfather, who helped raise me, was a very religious man. In fact, he built his house behind his church. And he always taught me that, when you have others who have needs, it is your job as someone who has means to help support. And so I've always lived my life saying that it was stronger for us to have those values, those Christian values to help others than it is to just say, well, it's too much of a cost. I mean, I can't imagine what kind of country we would be if we were looking at it and said, well, that kid has too many needs, forget it. It's so disheartening to see the discussion thrown to this so often. Because what you're essentially saying then is you're saying, look, just because a student was born with needs, we shouldn't be giving them quality. And I think that says a lot about someone's character when they're willing to just say, oh, well, you're in a wheelchair, we don't care to give you the cost you need to help you make sure that you're accessible to all things you deserve. It says a lot to me. I have friends I went to college with who are blind. I know I have friends who are deaf, and they're just as competent as I am. Had they not grown up in a district where they were supported, they wouldn't have gone to college. My friend, sorry, I always laugh at his name because it's Michael Moore, and he's like totally opposite of the Michael Moore who makes documentaries. But Michael, he was one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He could come talk to him, and he'd be like, oh, Matt, hey, your birthday is blank, 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 and it was a Friday on the year you were born. How are you doing? How's your girlfriend blank and your best friend blank? And I'm like, how do you remember all this? Had he not been given the same opportunities, I would have never met someone and had those enriching opportunities in my life. Now, I'm going to say as an educator, I've taught inclusion for every year but this year. This is the first year I haven't taught inclusion, which is weird for me. And inclusion means that you have special education students included in the general education. And honestly, because I take this big open-ended approach, I've always found it to be beneficial to my students because it makes them better people. When we talk about the fact that the same isn't the same as, treating everyone the same isn't the same as treating everyone fair. And it usually takes a little bit, especially my kindergartners this year, it took a little bit. But once they kind of get that connection there, they really start to have this awareness of each other, which makes them cooperate better, it makes them collaborate better, it makes them better, at communication. And those are all those soft skills again that are career predictors of success, college predictors of success. And so I personally see it as something that doesn't just benefit the students with needs, it benefits everyone if it's done properly. So I think that's my answer.
Anybody else have any questions before I continue on? Okay, all right. It is expected by the year 2030, over 66% of all jobs will require a college degree. Knowing this, what balance should our district be placing on college readiness skills versus career-specific skills, and what should be the deciding factor for which students have access to which?
So a similar question was brought up at the Republican Liberty Caucus Forum, and I know some of the candidates, knowing the demographic that night, said left and right, oh, we need to be focusing so much on career readiness, which is great. I have nothing against it. I have friends who do things like electrician. I mean, my dad was an electrical guy, worked in a mill. I have nothing against that. But when you look at the fact that entry-level jobs more and more often require these degrees, and it's not because the degrees are specific, but it's because it essentially says to a job, you have the ability to learn something new and figure out how to take on new challenges. So what I would say, and again, this comes from having a higher quality curriculum, when you have curriculums that's based on problem solving, collaboration, planning, teamwork, long-term goals, you have both career and college-ready skills all in one. Do I think we should have career tracks available? Most certainly. If people want to go into trades, that's a great thing. Those are jobs that are still going to be needing to be filled. So those are things that we need to look at, but do I think us as a district should make that decision? No, I think that's repulsive. I think those decisions need to be made up with students, a guidance counselor, and parents. Those are those decisions that they need to make because it's what's their future. I should have nothing to say with that decision. The board should have absolutely nothing to say. I mean, that is such an overreach to say our board came up with a policy that says all students who are blank will go into this track. It is such an overreach, and it's appalling because I know that there's been discussion, well, there should be some sort of test. But, I've taught kids for years, and when I look at it, I go, well, I have students who, and I'm going to give you an example, and this one always I'm going to try not to cry because this is my first year doing inclusion. I had a student who had autistic needs, and he went from being in a contained room where he had never been with the general population, and he was in 4th grade, and it was his first year, so 5 years he had gone without ever interacting with other students, and they threw him in. That year was like the biggest shift I had seen in this kid. When I met this kid, I remember people saying, he's never going to be able to handle a job, he's never going to be able to handle this. By the end of the year, he went from a kid who didn't even know anyone's name. He had made friends. He had learned to work with others. He had learned how to plan and say, oh, I have homework due here. I don't see a reason why, that we should look at all students and say, look, yeah, we should give you the skills you need, and then you make that decision. Do I think we should have opportunities? Yeah. Do I think it's responsible for us at this exact second to say we're going to expand that? No, we don't have the money. And everyone who keeps throwing around like, oh, I'm going to add this, I just want to know where you're getting the money. Because they're lying. And one thing I can't say is lying. I'm one of the most honest people to the point where my wife goes, yeah, I don't have to worry about you lying because you can't do it anyways. Your face gives a sign. So, I mean, like, it's repulsive to me. I don't know why you would lie to constituents and just say, look, it's something we want to add. Can we do it right now? No, it's not feasible. Should we look at it down the road? Yeah. But I think that's where the discussion needs to be honest.
Okay, going on with that, you know, the thing about maybe bringing back industrial arts and consumer economics, which for all of us older people be home ec. Where do you see the Career Center in all this? I mean, because people in Medina are paying taxes to the Career Center, and they have many of those programs, but yet for some reason, Medina students do not attend in the numbers that maybe they should or other districts do. So how would you handle, what would you suggest that we could do there?
Well, I mean, for me, this is a different thing, because again, I grew up in a district that was a little bit different than this district. Our district, we outsourced all that. And so it's different looking at this district where I see it's all here and it's all central. Again, I think that those discussions are great. And I think that those are things that we should be talking about and be making parents aware. Look, here are the options we have. You know, if you want to have this discussion, we'll sit down with the guidance counselor, we'll sit down with you and your child, and we'll talk about it. I think that's the most we can offer. If parents choose not to take it, I mean, I can't force someone. But I definitely see having that as an asset, especially again, as we look at what kinds of jobs are going to exist. I mean, I did a whole video series here on my, because I have a teaching YouTube channel, and I did a whole video series on this. The jobs that exist now are not the jobs that my kindergarten students are going to have available to them 20 years from now. The trade jobs that are available now are going to be different. The college jobs that are available now are going to be different. And so we need to make sure that that asset is available and that students recognize what value it's going to give to them. I think that's kind of the disconnect there. If people don't recognize the value it brings.
Okay, as a candidate, you have been the only one to publicly point out your displeasure with the other candidates. Some in the community may see this as offensive, but what has motivated you to take such actions, and how can we be sure if elected you'll be willing to work with the other school board members?
Okay, so I'm going to talk again about the district I work in. I work in a district where everyone claims to have a business sense or a business mind. Our district has made cut after cut. We've dropped in prestige year after year. And as such, the local economy does not attract new families. I have parents who are already telling me they're looking to move out at the end of the year, and their kids are in kindergarten. They haven't been in it for long. That's a huge loss. When I look at that and I see candidates who can't answer policy questions, when I see candidates who have attacked teachers and parents, when I see candidates who aren't willing to bridge that divide and bring everyone together, that concerns me. I want my kids to go here. I want my kids to, I want to stay here. I mean, my wife and I bought that house because it has the most beautiful view ever. We look out in our backyard and it's a park. And we have these great trees. I want to stay there. I don't ever want to be like, man, we're not getting what we want. And I look at this and I go, one of the most important ways to ensure that is to have a board that knows policy, it knows procedure, and it understands what research says. I work in a district that didn't know their own policy and couldn't get a levy on the ballot. There has been candidates who have been running who had to be corrected by the county auditor on what a continuing levy does. That's not someone I want serving my child. Someone who has to have the county auditor describe to you how things work. If you're running for a position, you should at least know the basics. There's another candidate who NCTA had to correct, and I had to correct when they talked about funding, when they talked about standardized testing, when they talked about curricular decisions. That's not someone I want serving my children. I mean, the business sense is great, and it's done an awesome job at saving us from all the trouble we had. But it hasn't brought back where we were. And so the reason I jumped into all this is because I, as someone who's watched what's happened to other districts, said there's no way I'm going to sit by and let that happen to my home. This is my home. I may not be a native Medina, but I'm proud to be here. And there's no reason I'm going to sit by and watch it happen. And I think that's the truth. As it comes to collaboration, I have two stories for you quick. I know I ramble on, I'm sorry. I'm a talker. That's why I make a good kindergarten teacher. We just read stories. No, we don't read stories all day. We don't do that. So, but I have 2 stories. So my first year teaching, I gave out my phone number to everyone. I got really, really sick to the point where I was in the hospital, and there was a sub for a couple days, and I got a call that Friday night. I think it was like 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And I remember because my now wife, who was my girlfriend then, was like, "Who the heck is calling you at this time of night while you're sick?" And it was a really angry parent about something that had happened that day. And I was like, I wasn't even there. I was in the hospital. Like, I'm really sorry, but like, I don't know what to tell you. I did not let that stop me from working with this parent or servicing that child. I still let that child stay after when I would have once a month before we were doing big projects. Like, hey, anyone wants to stay after till 6? Here you go, I'm here. I never let that get in the way. I never let that get in the way of me doing my job. When conferences came around a few months later, I still met with that parent. I still had the portfolio ready and said, hey, here's how your daughter's doing, here's where we're at. Because that was my job. I don't see why differences in opinion, differences in understanding should come between us getting along. Some of my best friends are people who I truly did not like very much at first. And as you get to know people, you're like, you know what? Let's find a common ground, and then you find it, you're like, this is great, let's just keep going. Another story is I had an intervention specialist who I did not get along with very well years ago, to the point where she would point out things that she didn't like I was doing in front of students. But it didn't stop me from planning with her on Thursdays. They didn't stop me from asking her every time I made a decision, what do you think? They didn't stop me from ensuring all of our students in the room got the best education. You know, just because you agree with someone doesn't mean you shouldn't do your job. And I feel like anyone who is worried about that, you're welcome to address that to me. But again, this is why I've reached out to everyone throughout this campaign since day one. I don't believe in letting bridges be burned down. I believe that, strong communication, coming at every problem with a calm, kind of reflective stance, saying, how can I help this, even if you know you're wrong, just saying, okay, it's okay, I'm wrong, whatever, let's move on. I think that's what we need. We need that mindset, not people who are going to attack our teachers and our parents, because that's just going to cut people off. That's going to cause people to remove themselves from those discussions, which is going to remove our district from having the attainment we need. So, am I willing to work with anyone? I'm willing to talk to anyone. I've made that clear since day one. My campaign has taken questions from people who've been really critical of me. And I've turned around and said, you know what? That's a great point. Here's what I think now. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I think that's what we need from a board is someone who's willing to say, yeah, here's what's going on. I'm willing to reflect, change. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I think that's where we're going.
Okay. How long have you lived in Medina? 5 years?
Yeah, it's been roughly about 5 years, right before my daughter was born.
Okay. So, a relative newbie, but
Well,
how do you feel you can?
I've been around for a while too. So I hate to go into my personal politics of my life. My daughter's mother, my ex, we're both happily remarried, and everyone's great, good fun times. Legit, we're all friends now. We were together since 2006. So I've been coming out here for a long time. I remember when they cut buses, because I remember her mother, how angry she was that she had to wait an hour to pick up her grandson from school every day. It was an hour. I remember her just saying, we'd call her cell phone, and she'd be like, oh no, I'm still sitting here at Ella, I haven't gotten him yet, I'm sitting in line. I've watched everything that's happened. But the reason we moved here is that I wanted my daughter to be near her family. And the reason I'm staying here is because I want my kids with my wife to be near their family. And so I'm not getting that question, but I just want to be clear that I've been paying attention to the district for some time. I haven't lived here, but I was also in college for a while, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Tom brought this up, and again, on another candidate's Facebook page today, which I just want to say I've been blocked from. They're talking about, she was talking about the emergency levy, and says that she cannot 100% support that because it will increase taxes. And I did print this off, And this is called a substitute emergency levy, which actually the millage is going to go down. We're going to ask for 5.2, so we're going to not collect any more money. But a couple of concerns that I've heard in the community, you can address each one individually, is one, we've lost 400 kids, so why do we need as much money? But as we pointed out, that's a huge sum of money. But two, why does it have to be continuous? Why can't we just give you 5 years to see how you do with this money, and then we'll talk about going continuous? What is your opinion on that?
So I'm gonna jump that question to cable.
Okay.
So, cable and utilities, the price that they have today is not the price it was 10 years ago. I remember what I paid when I first moved out on my own, and I will tell you the price I pay now is substantially higher. Cost of, expenses go up as inflation goes up, as the value of things go up. And so when it comes down to it, our operating costs are always going to rise, even if we kept everything stagnant. We kept teachers stagnant, we kept everything else stagnant. Just the cost to heat our buildings alone is going to go up. So when we say, why do we, need to keep the current funding? Because we know it's gonna go up. So we at least need to stay where we're at, because that's what trends predict. And anyone is welcome to argue, but as, again, my nerdiness goes to history, economics, and education policy, economic trends show that it's not going to go down anytime soon. We're not gonna see milk jump down to 30 cents a gallon. Not happening. It is where it is. It's probably gonna go up a little bit over my lifetime, but it's definitely not going down. So we look at things like operating costs, we know they're at least going to be where they are now. What I will say about comments about this levy is that, I'm just gonna point it, it concerns me that, again, our county auditor, Mike Kovac, already explained it to this person how it worked. Already explained it once. Here's how it works. Please stop spreading false information to our constituents. I'm sorry, I feel like I answered only half your question.
No. Talking about costs, staff costs make up a majority of our budget as a district. What are your thoughts on this expenditure, and where do you think our spending should be focused?
Again, as I've said, innovation and looking at creative ways in our budget is going to be the best solution. As I've said, often staff can cost less than other investments. The best predictor for student achievement is having a human body available as a teacher. Across all boards, all research, the best predictor isn't going to be which curriculum you provide. It's not going to be, which technology you have. It's going to be the quality of your teachers. There's been lots of research, and the data is very clear. It's one of those things where we have to say, look, maybe it's a high cost, but if it's going to give us results, then that's what we need. I know, as someone who's in education myself, when you look at when districts invest in staff training over, more resources, you have long-term gains. When you're willing to say, let's teach our staff how to do blank, 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 and not buy all these materials, you end up with longer gains, and you end up with staff who are more competent, which also gets higher results. I don't see the staff as a threat to our district. I see it as an asset. And, I understand some people may take that comment and be upset by it. But when it comes down to it, these are people, as Mr. Skidmore very clearly pointed out, who knew what they were signing up for when they got into education. They knew they weren't going to be making millions of dollars. The average teacher does not make as much as people think they do. It's not a job where your cap is going to be around $100,000. It's not. And as much as we want to argue against it, those arguments are people trying to, throw us a red herring so we're not looking at the other hand that's taken from our pocket. I think that's the honest truth.
Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask before we kind of wrap this up? Okay, just the last question, candidates can promise what they want to make changes or talk about all the accomplishments they'd like to see, and you have, and I think you've been very clear about it. Alternatively, candidates can discuss what they will do once elected. What have you already done to take the initiative in this election to show your constituents that you are proactive and you have a deep desire to serve this community?
So since day one, my campaign page itself has said, hey, anyone who's got a question, send it to me, and I will answer it in a video and send it to everyone, that I'm willing to make myself accessible. I reached out to every PTO in this city. I reached out to administrators, I reached out to teachers since day one, and I said, look, I want to hear your concerns. I reached out to parent groups, Medina Moms Clubs, East and West. I reached out to Medina Early Childhood PTA, and I said, tell me your concerns. Tell me what I can do to ensure that your voices are heard. I've done it since day one. My concern's not been meeting, I met with state representative so-and-so. My concern's been our community, because these are the people we live with. This is our neighbors, this is our family. I think that's what our community deserves, is someone who's willing to say, look, our focus needs to be here and helping each other out first. I mean, there's something I say to my students all the time. Life's hard enough, so we gotta get along, because life is hard enough. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to support each other in our local community first and foremost.
Do you have any closing comments you want to make? Oh, okay.
Another question.
All right.
Come on down.
Hi.
I've wanted to make that joke for too long, I'm sorry.
Hi, Matt. Push the button.
Hi.
Oh, which one? This one? Okay. My name is Jeanne Pritchard. I'm a graduate from the Medina City School System. I graduated in 1983 from Valley Forge. And I just want to say you're the kind of person I would have liked to have for a teacher.
You know, I mean, I'm sure it can be fun at times, but I totally get the eye rolls all day. I make too many dad jokes, I'm told. Like my 5-year-olds are like, Mr. Collins, that was not funny. Please stop. So I mean, I try really hard because I know I'm not like naturally funny. But there are times where like, oh my gosh, just stop. Like someone tell him, like, that wasn't funny, Mr. Collins.
Well, I substitute taught in Parma for 1 year, and there were a lot of the substitutes didn't want to work with the special ed kids. So they'd always call me, and I'd always take them because I thought they were the best ones to work with. But I did want to ask you a question about because you're a kindergarten teacher.
This is my first year in kindergarten.
Are you all day kindergarten in Parma?
We are.
Okay. My question is directly about that. In Medina, they want to go to all day kindergarten, but people are saying since the RIF a couple years, or the RIF a couple years back, they got rid of language arts and some phys ed and some other classes at the middle school level, and it's an issue that people feel like we're offering up full day kindergarten to get 600 votes for those families that would benefit from that, versus fixing a problem that's never been rectified. So I just want to know what your feeling is about language arts in the middle schools, because I am a children's librarian and I'm a huge advocate of literacy. I think without reading, you're lost in life.
Well,
I mean, it's the biggest skill you can take away from school and public education.
I'm gonna agree with your last comment here about literacy, and my wife would probably not be angry with me for agreeing that, because we have tubs in our basement of books, just tubs. But I'm gonna comment quick and then I'm gonna answer. Is that okay with you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I will say is and I sat in with me from Mr. Sable and the rest of our administrative team. I mean, I reached out to them as well. And what I will say is our current 5-year plan, the focus is not kindergarten right now. That is down the road. If you look at it, it doesn't say kindergarten by 2019. It says within 5 years. Because we understand that isn't going to get us the same bang for our buck as it is going to be investing in other things. My understanding is that middle school is a focus. My understanding, especially if you're talking to Mr. Farson, is that that's been kind of vocalized to them, that that's a focus. Personally, after having this question brought to my page months ago, I changed my mind after I thought about it. I know whoever brought it, their math was way off, but regardless, looking at it, I go, okay, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. That's something that we need to have available. I will comment with one thing. Other districts are adding open enrollment with kindergarten, and it is gonna pull. As I said, Cloverleaf this year is like, and other districts have been losing, but they're up. They're up. And looking at that, we're saying, well, that's a district that's having open enrollment. How is that affecting us? And so not having these options are going to affect us eventually, but again, we have to prioritize. It's like anything else, right? You got a budget at home, you say, well, I can buy groceries this week, or we can go to Cedar Point. If you don't say, hey kids, we're going to Cedar Point, you can eat next Thursday, and say, okay, we're buying groceries. You know, we need to have our priorities, which I would argue that middle school staffing should be a priority, but then you still have in the back of your mind, man, my kids and that memory, that's gonna be great. So having that vision down the line, saying, well, how are we gonna find it? And then having the ability to plan for it as we go. Do I think we need to have both eventually? Yeah. Do I think it's feasible right now? No.
All right, but there were kindergartens in other systems that weaned it in. They had parents paying in Strongsville for their kids to go to full-day kindergarten. I work at the Strongsville Library.
Okay.
And then the other kids were just still the half day. And they said that the teachers had to teach the exact same curriculum, whether they were there all day or half a day. So those parents basically were just paying to have their kids there the rest of the day while they were at work.
Well, yes and no.
Right?
So yes and no, and I used to substitute before I got my teaching job, and I substituted in Olmsted Falls kindergarten building. They have a primary, or they have it's a preschool kindergarten building. And the thing was, is there was no like time for expansive learning. It was like, here's what we're doing, here's next, here's next, here's next. 5-year-olds don't have that attention span. They just don't. I mean, I love my kids, but if I give them 30 things to get done in an hour, it's not gonna happen. It's not. I'm gonna get a bunch of piles of random things, and I'm like, well, I don't even remember giving you this.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, having that opportunity allows us to make sure that learning is more meaningful, and it's more well-rounded, and it's more rich. It allows us to say, hey, let's not have the bare minimum. It allows us to say, hey, let us have quality. Because remember, those standards that the state gives us, those are just the bare minimum. That's not what you have to teach. I mean, when the state says you need to know historically that people moved across the country, it's not saying like, hey, you just need to understand that people moved. It's, you know, your job as an educator is saying, let's teach why people moved, how they moved, what that looked like. So having a shorter period is just, you're gonna go down to the bones, which isn't gonna do anyone any service in the end. But again, I think we need to focus on what's gonna get us for the best bang for our buck. And then does need to be a focus down the line.
But does Medina have any research or data to show or prove that all day is definitely academically beneficial to a 5-year-old?
Yeah, there's lots of research out there to show that the longer time period does benefit kids. There are higher attainment rates. They end up having, and I will tell you other districts, again, I was talking to Cloverleaf the other day, as they added this, so the state of Ohio has what's called the third grade reading guarantee. Essentially, it's a law based in research that shows if you're not on target for reading by third grade, by age like 8, that you're going to struggle forever to catch up. And so what the state of Ohio said was, we need to ensure every child is reading on grade by third grade, period. Period. No excuses, we're gonna do it. So what we've seen is that states that have that full day kindergarten are getting that higher attainment when it comes to third grade, which means they're paying less for remediation. They're paying more to ensure that students are learning at age level, and that allows us to not have to have intervention services, title services, that allows us to have those focuses on other areas. So when we set up that strong foundation, you get a long lifetime learner. I like to say to my parents in my classroom, I'm not here to teach your children facts. I'm here to give them the toolbox that they're going to need to learn the rest of their life.
Okay, now on the other side of this, the middle school kids not having all that language arts that they used to have. In that time from the point that they cut it till now, has anyone talked to any of the freshman language arts teachers to see what they feel about that? What has occurred since that time? Have grades fallen? Are kids performing lower on ACT tests? Has anyone found out anything from the high school language arts teachers to see if it has actually had an impact on those kids?
You know, I can't honestly answer that for you right now. I don't think I have all the data in front of me, but what I will tell you is I'd be happy to look at it. And my original background, I went to college to go into cognitive psychology. I went to how the mind learns. And I worked in stats labs during my undergrad. I like numbers. So I would love to look at those numbers and say, well, where are we getting attainment and where are we missing? How is this affecting our attainment later down the road? And how is it hurting us? I'd be happy to have those discussions, and I think we need to have those discussions with our teachers, again, in those public settings. Those are those discussions we need to have with parents, teachers, and it needs to be available to everyone to be part of that discussion. No more of this, hey, we're just having it kind of a closed event. It needs to be open so that everyone, including community members who maybe don't even have high schoolers, have concerns. Because again, when our district does well, it helps all of us. I mean, that's why the school board race should be so vital to everyone, because it's going to build our local economy. It's going to help us strengthen as a community. But I'd be happy to look into that.
Okay, one other thing I sure want to mention from my observation. I was born and grew up in Parma. I grew up in a ranch, a 4-bedroom ranch. There were 9 kids in my family. My father's 92, he's still in that ranch. He's walking with a walker, and I take care of him twice a week. A lot of the senior citizens in the city of Parma don't move out because they're in one-level homes. So there's a huge senior citizen population in Parma, whereas in Medina, the vast majority of homes here in housing are colonials with second floors, 4 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. So I think we will always have a demand for these homes by younger families that want the space and the bigger yards for kids. But I just wanted to put that out.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, you look at the community, and most of our houses have come from the past 15 to 20 years. Most of them are younger people who moved in here.
Yeah, mine was built in '81. It's a 4-bedroom. That's why we moved out here. We had a 3rd kid, and our house was too small. We were in a little postage stamp ranch in Parma.
And mine too. But I mean, looking at the newer buildings that we've had in the district, you know, our Northrop, our Waite, and our Blake. Those are in newer communities because those are the parts of town that have grown. So when a candidate wants to make an argument about we have this aging population, you go, well, I look at the demographics in the housing, like what are you talking about? I'm not saying ignore a population because that's never a practical response, but to deny the fact that this community has been built up over the past 20 years by new families coming in and that we're not having the same inflow is irresponsible.
Did you know we used to have a kindergarten center right here by the high school where all the kindergartners went?
I did. I wish we.
Yeah, it's different. It was real different.
It's so cool when you see that because
yeah.
And I'm friends with the principal at the Olmsted Falls building. It's so cool when you see it because again, human resources at the end of the day are much more valuable than any book, than any textbook, than any purchased tablet. Having those teammates to talk to, having experts in the building to talk to, gives you a much higher attainment than any amount of iPad purchases available. Right? I'd love to see that. I think that's fantastic. I know Talmadge has that too. I did one of my placements a long time ago in their building, and it was kindergarten, first, second. I mean, it's so different. You know, you look at it, and you're like, man. But you look at that because you're able to do that. You're able to centralize all your resources, and so there's no reason all your students can't do well. There's no excuse.
Right. Well, I want to leave you with one last thing.
Sure.
As a student myself going through school and looking back, you know, the school board had nothing to do with where I got in my life. My parents, my mom never read to me. She was a housewife who didn't drive, and it was my teachers. I just have to put it out there. Our kids spend 8 hours, 7-8 hours a day with teachers, and they come home, they're tired, they take their bath and eat their dinner and do their homework and go to bed. They spend more time during their childhood with the teachers in those rooms. And I agree with everything you said about the teachers. That's why I think it's so important for you to get on this board.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, and I look at that, I have a couple students in my room who have working parents who go to the last gate. They're in the building before I get there, and I'm an early arriver. And I am. My wife, it drives my wife insane because I drop off my kid like way too early. She goes to her grandparents, but they're like, oh, it's 7. Like, can you like not be this early? I'm like, I got stuff to do. But anyways, I have students who are there before me every day, and they're there after me every day. And I look at that and I realize, your parents work and have it hard enough. And if I can't be, and that's why I try to bridge so hard, and I know you came here later, I read a letter from one of the parents, and I'll show it to you when we're done. I work so hard to ensure all my parents know, which is something I tried to do with my campaign too, everything that's going on at all times. I sent pictures. When I taught 4th, 5th, and 3rd grade, I sent out all the project rubrics. I sent out deadlines. I sent everything. I said, look, here's what we're doing. Here's a video of us doing math this week, guys. Because as a parent, you're right, you miss so much of it. And I know as a parent myself, like, anytime I don't know what's going on in my kid's school, I'm like, man, I want to know. That's your kid's life.
Right.
But you can't control your work schedule. I mean, a lot of us have to work. A lot of us have to have 2 parents working. And if you don't, that's great. I admire you. My mom didn't work until I was 10. That's fantastic. But from there on, I grew up with a working single mom. And so I've seen what it's like trying to juggle being a parent and, having a career and manage your budget and your bills. It's hard.
Yeah,
And
well, my mom was home taking care of the babies while I was at school, but those teachers were the ones I spent all my time
And
with.
that's it.
And they had a huge impact on my life, and that's why I'm a librarian.
Well,
I had such great reading teachers and language arts teachers. That's why I'm here to advocate for the middle schools. It's a shame that Medina's, how could we be doing this to our middle schoolers? I can't believe it. It's like.
And our solution's definitely not going to be banning books. That's definitely
No,
not gonna fix our problem.
Definitely not.
I know I know one of the candidates has pushed, and I know it'd be fantastic to have all these legal issues, but that's not gonna solve our issues clearly. As I said, it's these dialogues that are gonna solve it, right? But thank you, I mean, I appreciate it, as a teacher, you recognize that, some days you see those kids more than their family will. And you're like, at the end of it, and that's why I send notes home sometimes. I sent one home today, I have a little girl who had a really rough day. But I know she won't see her grandma until 6. So I sent a note, here's what happened today. She was having a rough morning, I just want you to be aware she's not in trouble. And just so you know, so that we can be on the same page. If you need to get in touch with me, shoot me an email, I'll get back to you tonight. And I think that's where our school board should go too, is having that same accountability, transparency, and respect for our families and our teachers.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Okay, since you brought this up, my one last question. I mean, you brought up, and Hudson has done this. They have like a K1, 2.
They have a 4 or 5 too. I interviewed. I got the final 2 this year. It's a really cool building.
Yeah, and I think they're going to redo it. But my question would be, would you like to see that happen in Medina with all the elementary schools that
So
we have?
the only thing I would point out is that our district is very large because of the townships it includes, and the issue would come down to the busing costs. When you expand what students are going to what building, you got to provide more busing. So as I said, Avon Lake has a 5-6 building. Almost everyone got bused. Unless you lived within like walking distance, I mean like 5-minute walking distance, you got bused. And so that's a lot of buses you have to have running at 7 a.m. It's a lot of buses. You have to have your whole fleet, and then that whole fleet has to move on to the junior high by 7:30, and then it's got to move on to the high. I mean, it's a lot of busing. And so we have to, do I think it's a great option? I've seen a lot of districts do it. It gets results. But it's going to come down to that balance between, can we afford it right now, and is it going to give us the best bang for our buck? I don't know. There's programs that I know that calculate that for us, and I'd be happy to look into that.
Well, the only thing is, since we have so many elementaries, we really could do, one side of town has like 3, the other side of town has 3. So I mean, we wouldn't have to bus them all that far.
No, I don't disagree. Again, that's why I said creative solutions here and having those dialogues would be fantastic. Would it be cool to see 2 K1 buildings, 2, 3, 2, 3 buildings and 2, 3, 4 buildings? Or sorry, K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that'd be great. Especially with the way content standards line up now. They're lined up so that whatever the whatever K reading .1 is the same as first grade reading .1, second grade reading .1. It's the same, and it's just progressive. So having those communities there will allow those gaps to be bridged, because you can say, well, here's what we need to know right now, how do we get to that, and what do you guys want to see? It allows better dialogue. I don't disagree. I think it'd be something worth looking into. But that's the busing, the only thing I can see is the issue.
Any more questions before we, okay, do you have any final remarks?
No, I just want to thank everyone, and I just want to say, our community deserves the best. This is a great community. We moved down here because we loved our neighborhood. I mean, I love where I live. We live in Falling Oaks, and we got the park in our backyard. The train comes through at 10 o'clock at night, and I hate that train. Our dog hates that train. But I love the woods behind our house. I love the view we have. I love that I can be doing yard work and my 3-year-old can be playing with her neighbors 2 doors down, and I can watch her and I know she's safe. I love that we have a pool. I love where we're at. And I think if we're gonna keep showing all these great things our community has to offer, all the things we put on in the summer, all the things we have on in the weekends in the square, we gotta rebuild our schools. We gotta give new families a reason to come in. As much as people hate millennials, and they can hate on them all they want, millennials are smart shoppers, and they're not gonna come for a bad product. There's a reason they don't go and buy cheap retail clothes. They know that for less price, they can go online and get the exact t-shirt they want that's gonna last 10 years. There's a reason they don't go to chain restaurants anymore. Nothing against chain restaurants. I just had Cheesecake Factory for the first time, it was pretty good. But they know that they can go and get fresh quality ingredients from neighborhood restaurant X, Y, and Z for less the price. And if we're gonna attract the next generation of families, we have to recognize that they grew up in a day and age when electronic shopping existed, and they know how to get the best bang for their buck. And that's what they're gonna look for. And when it comes down to it, they're gonna look at Ohio and they're gonna be comparing us to every other district in the state. So the question is, how do we stand out?
Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Now I'd like to thank you and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
And again, thanks for coming. And this will be, I believe, on YouTube and broadcast on the Medina Outrage page. So thank you.